With two of Webtoon's heavy-hitting comics now animated and the third on the horizon, I wanted to take a moment to make another small filler video. I've been playing around with the idea of making a longer video on this topic, but it just isn't big enough to put a lot of time into, nor is it small enough for a crudely edited video. Today, I wrote the first few titles that came to mind when thinking about the indie comics I enjoy and would like to see an adaptation of, not just an anime adaptation, but just adapted in any format. These comics are readily available to read except for one title. They come from different platforms, and I hope you'll find one you may have never heard of, kind of like my Great Comics video, but also not exactly. But fuck it, if I ever make a playlist for those videos, I'll probably add this one to it. Enough with the chit-chatting. I wanted to start with a comic I briefly mentioned in my Tower of God video. Can't See, Can't Hear But Love is a romance manhwa about a blind man and a deaf woman. I can't pronounce Korean names, so I'm not gonna risk it, but Min here was a manga artist. The key word is was, because due to overwork, Min loses his eyesight. Plunged into this world of darkness, he quits his job, puts his mentally ill mother into the care of a nursing home, and finds himself all alone. That is until he meets Sori, a deaf woman who was a fan of his manhwa and now loves the man behind it. The story weaves between past and present. We start with these two living a cozy domestic life comfortably in the third year of their relationship, then jumping back to witness Min losing his sight, meeting Sori, and coping with his loss. The comic takes full advantage of these characters, their disability, and the people around them. We witness the dynamic of one coping with his new disability and the deep depression he's plunged into, while the other, who was born disabled, is very happy, lively, expressive, and energetic. We see these two long for what they don't have to just love each other a little bit deeper, and we understand the limitations they feel being unable to expressively communicate that love. The comic brings discussion of Korea's poor welfare and healthcare system for the disabled and mentally ill. It contains characters who are genuinely kind and envious. It has a message of change, loss, desire, and coping, creating this tragically beautiful story about two people who are just as normal as you and I, who I struggle to call disabled because they are anything but society gives them this word to communicate that they're missing a sense that we're fortunate enough to have. I understand these characters. I know that just as much as they know, it doesn't matter that they can't see the other's face or hear the other's voice. They're in love, and that's all that really counts. I really want to see this story be given life in a new format. An anime would be wonderful if done by the right studio, like Mappa, or, and this is a long shot, but KyoAni. Just fucking anyone but A1 Pictures. But I would also like to see this receive a live-action K-drama, as the story is grounded in reality and doesn't require any special effects, just good acting. Can't See, Can't Hear But Love is a well-known manhwa for a reason, and if you haven't read it and feel like bawling like a bitch, then I highly recommend it regardless. On the opposite end of that spectrum, let's jump over to Webtoons. I've mentioned Bastard and Sweet Home before, but I'll be damned if I don't do it again. These are horror webcomics created by Young Chang Hong and Carby Kim. I hope to God I said that right. Bastard is the story of a young man who reluctantly aids his abusive serial killer father by helping lure in his next victim, while Sweet Home is the supernatural story of another young man fighting for his life during the end of the world. And I highly recommend both to anyone who's a fan of horror. You can't go wrong beginning one over the other, but if you want to read their completed work first, start with Bastard. Each story has their own strengths, are equally good, and are vastly different from one another. Bastard is a dark psychological horror that explores the fears of this young man as he battles protecting himself and more victims from the hands of his deeply disturbed father, who will kill him without hesitation. While Sweet Home is the survival horror with a main character who grows from selflessness to willingly sacrificing himself to give others a chance at life. Did I mention that both of these are fucking terrifying? Yes, I am well aware that Sweet Home is already receiving a Netflix live-action adaptation, but I wholeheartedly believe Netflix chose the wrong comic. It's Bastard that should receive the live-action version, because just like Can't See, Can't Hear, it's grounded in reality. Bastard will need strong acting and direction, along with a just as strong lighting team, while Sweet Home involves animating this motherfucker and that motherfucker, not to mention this motherfucker, in a live-action setting, and I don't know how they're gonna do that. Either way, I hope the Sweet Home adaptation is good, and Netflix realizes that Bastard is a comic that exists, and they probably fucked up in choosing the wrong one. I am cheating here, but I really didn't like the Let's Play shorts. This wasn't what I wanted from you, Webtoons. I don't like these shorts because they were made to promote the comic and the platform, but why do you have to promote one of the most popular comics on your site, Webtoons? Editor Nick and I read read new updates religiously. I know others who love this comic just as much as we do, and this really wasn't what we wanted. I can't be mad at the shorts because they're bite-sized and were an ad that doesn't ruin the chances of a proper adaptation, but I'm upset because these shorts were an ad. It's nice seeing the characters I adore animated with voices, but I want something that captures these characters and the story of their happiness, struggle, and self-love. I want my girl Sam and her crew to be treated better and hope that she will one day soon. During the early days of this channel, I briefly talked about They Say I Was Born a King's Daughter during one of my yearly comic videos. I've been keeping up with the comic the best I could and would hopefully like to make a video on it. I just don't know what about. Back then, this was one of the most popular comic on Tap-As, and I don't know how it's doing in the ranking, but I'm glad it's still ongoing and has a story to tell. The manhwa is actually an adaptation itself. Based on the hit web novel of the same name, the manhwa just brought in more readers because it's a comic, I guess. Soo-hee Kim was a beautiful woman in love. Once again, the keyword is was because she was murdered. Death rips her apart from her soulmate and she wakes up to find herself reincarnated as a newborn with all the memories of her past life. Now Soo-hee is a princess trapped in a world where magic exists and the rights of women are null. She's very fortunate to be a princess because if she were in the outside world, horrible things would happen to her and she would be unable to defend herself. The reason why women are treated poorly is because they cannot produce magic, but Soo-hee will not allow that. Magic or not, she will be treated like a human being. She just has to get the men in her life to see her as one. I don't know what to call They Say I Was Born a King's Daughter. I don't want to call it an anti-sexism story because I never read it as that. And as the story goes on, it still has that anti-sexism message, but it's also more than that. Shannon, the anime misfit, introduced me to the term reverse isekai, and I feel comfortable calling it such. This is an isekai about a woman, now a girl, who goes on a mission to combat sexism with love, and she's very strategic about it. But now there's political tension and sadly a school setting. Nevertheless, I really enjoy this story, and while I would call it my lesser pick when it comes to the prospects of adaptation, I would like to see it get something. I don't know, just something. Now, this comic was the one pick I said wasn't readily available. It is sadly behind a paywall and there are a lot of chapters. Going back to webtoons, Lumeen is another comic that appeared in my Tower of God video. This fantasy series about mages and werewolves was created by Finnish artist Emma Colgill. Lumeen is a young werewolf who can't hold a position as a bodyguard. After his last unsuccessful job, Lumeen is now homeless and vulnerable. That is until the mage Aiden shows up and trusts Lumeen to protect his son Cody, a cold and rather cruel young man who insists he doesn't need protection, but he obviously does, or else this story would be way shorter. I feel like saying Lumeen is a story about friendship is selling it short. Yes, this comic is about two young men with opposing personalities who become better people through their friendship and blah blah blah, but is also a fantasy drama comic and it delivers on those ends. As much as there are tender moments between lovable characters, there's also beautifully drawn fight scenes and a magical mystery to follow. If Lumeen were animated, it would kind of make me feel like a grown-up kid watching the show. You know, that feeling you get when you watch a really good updated version of something you loved when you were younger, like Travis Knight's Bumblebee movie, or maybe that's just me. And if webtoons were to reach out to more studios to animate more of their comics, I would like it if those studios were outside of Japan. Like a Canadian or European studio would be fine. And if I were able to produce a Lumeen adaptation, I would pick a studio outside of America. I would like for the language to be spoken not in English but in the creator's native tongue. And some help from a Japanese studio for the fight scenes would be rad, but if I were to make a Lumeen adaptation, I want it to be all its own. However, I know the possibility for that is a long shot, along with some of the other comics I talked about today, but there's one comic that I'm really gunning and hopeful for, one that I desperately hope to see adapted soon, one I've been following for a long time and keeps getting better and better with every update. Lore Olympus is probably one of my favorite comics. I say probably because I had to take a break from it, and I've been afraid to face it since, but in a good way. Greek mythology is my favorite of all mythos humankind has ever imagined and created. The rape of Persephone is one I know all too well. It's literally Greek myth 101. The story of Persephone's abduction by Hades has been retold thousands of times in many different ways, and that's probably because out of the three big gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, Hades was the most faithful. This is cited by Rachel, the creator of the comic, as her reasoning to retell this story. Lore Olympus has had me in its grasp ever since it was in Webtoons Discovery section, well, back when it was known as Discovery. It captured me for its unique characters who also stayed true to their original origins, along with the reference humor and unique artwork. Then it got me for how it actually made Hades and Persephone's relationship romantic. This is a story consisting of two adults who want to enter a relationship together but are fucking nerds who don't know how to express it. Then it just keeps going, and we witness this comic discuss the age gap. We see brutal, toxic relationships, an accurate portrayal of stress, anxiety, and loneliness. We fucking see Zeus and Hera fight over Zeus's adultery, and it is glorious. But we also witness the damage Demeter does to her daughter with her helicopter parenting. This comic delves so deeply into mental and psychological abuse and trauma that it hit too close to home for me, where I reached a certain point in Persephone's story where she has to confront a traumatizing event. I had to stop because her story and mine are so similar. It's like looking at a mirror sometimes. And even though I've long since done what I think she may do and I'm over that event, I'm only human, and sometimes it still haunts me in the worst of ways. I can never really escape that event, and seeing her actually have to face the same trauma was just too damn heavy on my heart, and it still kind of is. And I want all of this to be adapted badly, but if it was adapted and one detail was out of place, I would foam at the mouth. I love this comic. I adore this comic. This and Let's Play are two of the best things currently ongoing, and if you haven't read it yet, you better fucking do it now. I don't want to see just anyone working on this adaptation. I want people who genuinely care, like the studio Shadow Machine, who produced one of my favorite shows, BoJack Horseman. Considering what BoJack and Tuca and Birdie are about compared to Lore Olympus, I can't think of anyone better to adapt Rachel's work. But that's what I think, and those are just some of the picks off the top of my head. I honestly doubt I'll revisit this topic, but hey, you never know. Instead, I'll kick back and keep an eye out for your comments and what comic you would like to see adapted. Or I'll just get back to making that next great comics video, because that's been in the works for a while and I would really like to get it done. Yep. Anyway, this has been your resident asshole, Ari, and happy reading, my friends. Magic or not, she will be treated like a human being, and we always gotta pause for Jewel here, people. Hey, you just sit down. Okay.